Hello, and welcome to the South Coast Artists Index, where artists, performers, and writers, as well as curators, directors, and supporters, anyone with ties to the creative community, drops by to introduce themselves to you. We'll talk about their beginnings, their vision, their passion, and so much more. The South Coast Artist Index podcast is brought to you in part by Heavenly Spirits, who invites you to celebrate the art of life and creative communities everywhere. Learn more at heavenlyspirits.com.
Welcome to the Artist Index. I'm Scott Bishop, your host for this episode. I'm a New Bedford-based singer, songwriter, and sound sculptor, making music under the name Scapegoat. I also present the live concert series Unexpected Music, which features South Coast musicians performing in non-traditional performing spaces around New Bedford. The In Focus podcasts are generously sponsored in part by Heavenly Spirits Importers and funded in part with grants from the New Bedford Cultural Council and the Fairhaven Cultural Council, local agencies supported by the Mass Cultural Council, a state agency. And now I'd like to invite our guest to introduce herself, spell her name for our audience, and talk a little bit about herself.
Sure. Hello, my name is Sarah Donner, and that is Sarah with an H, S-A-R-A-H, and Donner as in Donner and Blitzen, D-O-N-N-E-R, or the Donner Party, if you're privy to the cannibal stories of California's Great Donner Party. So sometimes if the handle is already taken for Sarah Donner, I am an at Sarah Donner Party, and that is why.
And you know, there's only one letter between dinner party and Donner Party.
Exactly. Yeah, restaurants are always been a hoot to go to for my family. Reservations, it's like, nope, that's really our name. It's not a joke, but okay.
You ever feel like doing it under an alias just so you don't have to deal with it?
Sometimes I feel like they think we might be, pulling a fast one on them at the restaurants when we say our last name is Donner. So usually we'll just give a first name.
All right. And you wear a lot of hats. I mean, I see you're wearing a knitted one right now, but I mean, I look at your job list, like singer-songwriter,
yeah,
musical director for South Coast Children's Theater,
yep,
music teacher, painter, president of Moby Kit Rescue. So your new nonprofit Kitten Rescue, which is a continuation of the volunteer work that you've been doing for years before.
Yeah.
Plus you have two bands. You help helping SEALs. You tour occasionally, and you also have your Cabaret in New Jersey once a year. And I guess my question to you is, when do you sleep?
I don't know. I'm trying to figure that out. I'm trying to have a better work-life balance, and it's been. I think over lockdown there's all this free time and not doing anything, and I sort of just like poured all my resources into the things that I could, and now that they have become things that we do more in person and or in New Jersey or at these locations, it has become a bit of a juggling act that I'm trying to do better at. So, yeah. No, I don't sleep.
And I mean, we were just talking before we started recording about, you're up feeding the bottle baby kittens. Like you've got like a feeding schedule. It's like being a new mother.
Exactly. So normally baby kittens, when they're born, they don't walk around or do anything. They just sit in a pile and their mom kind of plops there and they just hang out and suckle and, grow. But that means that they do get feedings, every 2 hours or so, or just all throughout the day. So, even in the middle of the night, I'll stay up till 1 a.m. or 2 a.m. And then my partner, Michael, will take like a 5 a.m. or a 6 a.m. But it's exhausting, and you do that for a couple of weeks, and then, their feedings get a little bit further apart, and it takes about 3 weeks before you can get a good night's sleep again.
Oh, wow.
4 weeks, which I mean, for those people who have children, human children, a couple of weeks doesn't seem all that unreasonable.
Yeah, if you got a newborn, you're literally talking, months, into probably the second year of life before you're actually getting a real sleep schedule.
Yeah.
You mentioned your partner, Mike. Oh, sorry. You mentioned your partner.
I was going to say, that's why we have cats, because I think, I need that life.
Yeah. So you mentioned your partner, Michael McLean. You have a synthwave duo with Michael, Kitten Slay Dragons. You guys just put out a new single, which is excellent. Sick Machine. Can you tell us a little bit about the song and what your process is for creating as a duo? Because, you're a singer-songwriter, so usually you're writing by yourself. What's the process with Michael working with him?
Sure. So when we initially started the band Kitten Slay Dragons, we were still living in New Jersey, which was about 5 or 6 years ago. And at that time, I wanted a project that was kind of fluffy and light. And I felt like, as a singer-songwriter, I do get very wordy, and I was wanting to have something a little more fluffy, which turned out to be more difficult than I thought, because I was like, I can't just write this like simple fluff song. I must make it more complicated. So that was kind of the impetus, and having a band that we could put on the road, because as Sarah Donner, I tour typically acoustically, and we wanted something a little louder and a little more boopier for bigger venues or noisy bars, or just a different genre to try and tap into other gigs as we were traveling. So that's kind of where that came. But Sick Machine, that's our newest song, and that kind of grew out of the frustrations of the pandemic and being diagnosed with ADHD last year for myself. And I've been learning a lot about ADHD and things about myself that I didn't realize were attached to that diagnosis. And I always thought ADHD is just like, oh, you were just hyper kid and you probably weren't a good student. And I was like, well, I was a great student, and you're always late. And I'm like, well, I'm always early. I don't have ADHD. It turns out, no, actually time management goes both ways. And, a lot of stuff, is connected to that. And so I just, I have other neurodivergent things. I have OCD, I have depression, I have anxiety, I have PTSD and trauma and all that stuff thrown in the brain. Just, sometimes it just feels like a sick machine and a broken brain. And I try to do better about that, but that was where that song was born out of my frustrations with my brain.
And also, dealing with all the different ways that those things can impact you that you weren't even aware of.
Exactly. Yeah.
Was it music first? Does Michael bring music to you and you're writing lyrics for it? Is it kind of like you hear stuff in progress and you're like, oh, I'll write something to that?
With this particular song, I wrote it on the guitar, and this one kind of just poured out of me. So I usually write something on the guitar, and I give him the chords, and he comes up with a bass line and starts producing it that way with the synthesizer. And so he just sort of piggybacks off of my ideas, and then he'll send it back to me, or we'll have a listen, and I'll give feedback. But this one kind of wrote itself. It wasn't too much of a struggle, so that was nice.
It's nice when that happens.
This part wasn't the struggle.
Yeah. Do you find some songs are like you have to do battle with them, and others are like they're right there, pretty much fully formed?
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, there are bits of songs that I have, or I have songs that are pretty written and fleshed out, but they've just never really went anywhere. And so it's been yeah.
Well, what I think is really fascinating, particularly with Sick Machine and the process you're describing, is that you're taking really an organic process of writing on guitar, and then Michael's translating that into a synthetic realm and coming back and saying, does this work? And you're tweaking that, which is such a fascinating way to work, because I would have expected, okay, you guys are on keyboards, you're programming stuff, but it's guitar first, which makes sense also because before you released the single, I was at one of your Stoveboat concerts and you played it acoustically. I'm like, oh, wow. I wasn't expecting that, because I'm used to Kitten Slay Dragons being a pure electronic thing. Yeah. And it's just fascinating to see that like back and forth between the organic and the synthetic.
I think when we initially started the project, I wanted to be more piano based, and I wanted to have more keyboard intentions in my writing. And it just I'm just a better writer on a guitar or ukulele, I think. I find it a little smoother in terms of writing, whereas piano, I have all of the keys in front of me, which means a lot more complexity.
Which means with ADHD, you now have too many options.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it turns out I need that. I'm pretty good with a streamline approach of writing. And, also, I got tired of carrying keyboards around. Like, and it wasn't even, I am so tired of carrying equipment, and I think it's just the process of, we've over the past couple of years figured out what's really important, what you really want to do, what's going to bring you joy, and try and cut out the rest of it. And one of those things I have decided to cut out was heavy keyboards. And so I'm starting to learn. I'm starting to learn the bass, and I'm also just we're poking around for some like really simple light keyboard MIDI things, and that's going to be it. I don't want to bring big DAW or digital audio workstation keyboards that are 100 pounds, to a gig that doesn't pay enough
Right.
to carry all this
the
stuff.
effort.
And I was like, if I can just do it and have a lighter instrument, or we can figure out ways to do these things more efficiently, or with a little less anxiety around, the setup process of music, I think that would be helpful for me. So that's kind of where we're headed with this now.
Got it. And what prompted you to start with bass?
What prompted me?
Playing. So, I mean, you started learning to play bass. Was there any, you just feel like I'm just going to learn bass?
Yeah, so there's another band project that we are in with our other partner, Kim Smith, called Middle Spoon. And it needed a bass player. And I was like, well, do we have a bass? We got a bass. And then I was a little like, I don't know if I'm going to be into this. And then I was like, this is actually kind of great to sit in the back and just have very minimal finger movements and just kind of groove with the rest of it. I get it. I get that. I get you bassists. I kind of understand now.
Bass is fun. I'm a guitar player, so I'm a bass playing guitar player. But a lot of times when I'm working on a song, one of the most fun things for me is actually doing a bass part. I mean, I can't really do anything fancy, but it's just fun. Like, here I am writing all the root notes for this. It's just like, yeah, I can see the appeal here. It's like you got all that low end and you're driving the rhythm.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And I like that. I like that a lot, especially as a songwriter. I tend to, when I'm working with a bassist or a band, I'm always having to tell the bassist to simplify. Don't get so complicated with that bass line. Nope, you could just do it with the root. We don't need. And so it's nice to kind of see it from that angle and like, oh, I understand why this might be boring playing the same notes again and again.
Right.
But also, I see how it can detract, if it gets a little too complicated.
Yeah, because there's already a lot going on.
Yeah, yeah.
So what's the configuration, Middle Spoon? You're on bass?
We're still working on.
Oh,
I'm mostly on bass. I do play. Well, we've all brought different songs to the table, and we're sort of in a bit of a pressure cooker because we have some gigs at the end of July. I mean, and these will be our first gigs that are asking for like a 45-minute, 60-minute set. And all three of us individually are songwriters, so we've kind of we have brought forth our wonderful songs that we would like to share with the group that haven't been realized in too many other capacities. And so as we're, picking up other instruments or having to take our songs and arrange them for the band, we've shuffled some instruments here and there. So I play bass and I play guitar. I think I might be playing piano on one thing, but when I say piano, I'm talking about a little Casio or something light, like I said.
Goes under your arm. Don't
right?
have to
just
have
like,
a big carrying case.
Nope. I'm like, it can be just a cheesy little keyboard. We don't need to do fancy things on it. I think that's going to be plenty. So that's what I play. And then between Kim and Michael, they play the drums. Both of them have Michael's learning drums and fiddle. Kim plays the fiddle, and then we all kind of take turns on the guitar for a song or two.
Oh, that's wild. So you're switching configurations song by song, which is fun.
Right. Yeah. Or a couple songs. Yeah. I think when we started that initially, I was like, that is really a pain in the butt for a sound person. And it kind of interrupts the flow. So my thought process is like, we're going to have pockets of songs where like we do these together and then we can change the configuration just so that it's not, I don't want it to be every song. It gets chaotic. chaotic
everyone.
and a little disorganized, and I think that it interrupts the flow of the set. So yeah.
It's kind of why, when I play shows, like I take all the songs with the capo, that bar thing you put over the fretboard, like, okay, I'm going to do all the songs with that second fret capo because I don't want to be jumping around and retuning every other song, because then there's no flow to the set and everybody's like, okay, checking my watch, when does this end?
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. I think we'll be able to handle it with the band because we're all pretty good at like banter and the in between. If we have if we have to take up some time for the audience, we should be able to entertain them.
Right on. So that tour is end of July. Where are you headed to?
Yeah, we are going to we have based the tour around a convention called Gen Con, which is in Indianapolis, and that happens the first weekend of August. And it's a big gaming convention. So lots of like Dungeons and Dragons, and from that to LARPing, role-playing games, board games, all games. So around that gig in Indianapolis, which is over the weekend, we've planned the rest of the tour. So still looking for something in Chicago, but we've got another convention we're playing in Pittsburgh, and then Durham, Nashville, New Jersey, New York. We're working on something in New York, and then we also have a kitten convention, of course.
Of course.
There's a kitten convention. It's not Middle Spoon. It'll be Sarah Donner, but conventions are just a real fun place where there's just an audience already there, and usually like really ugly fluorescent lights in a convention room. But everybody has a good time, and generally you can break even or make a few bucks in those situations, which is a little bit nicer than dive bars and ticket sales based gigs.
What got you connected with those conventions? I mean, the cat convention is pretty obvious because you've been doing volunteer rescuing for ages. How long
have I been doing kitten rescue? 2004.
18 years.
Yeah.
Wow.
I used to say, I've been doing kitten rescue for 15 years. And I'm going to keep saying 15, I think, because that just seems like 18. I don't know. When I get to 20, I don't want people to know I've been doing this for that long.
Why not? It's a great job. You do great work.
It is, yeah. Yeah, that's true. I should just be proud of it.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny because, cats were one of the bonding points for me getting to know you and Michael because, we adopted our cat Haggard up in Boston. We used to hang out with a woman who fostered that litter. So we started doing the same thing with you guys. I was surprised to find out that you're not a lifelong cat lady. This is something you came to later.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, 18 years, but you weren't were you previously a cat owner before that?
I have always loved animals. I wanted to be a marine biologist when I was a kiddo. I was going to be a marine biologist or a singer. That was in high school. I was like, well, these are the two tracks that I'm really interested in, and I'll just kind of see how it goes. So I've always loved animals, but I grew up with my mom's cat. Her name was Missy. She was my mom's cat. She wasn't my cat. And so, I was like, oh, we have a cat. And then we had a dog. After Missy passed away, we got a dog when I was 16. His name was Teddy, and he was my favorite buddy. And I didn't get a cat until, I think, 22, 23. My first cat was Duncan. And he, I would never, as a cat rescuer, ever. This is embarrassing. I bought that cat from a pet store. And I don't even think there are pet stores that you could do that these days. But my partner Michael was working a lot, and I remember it was February in New Jersey, and we were in a tiny apartment, and I was feeling lonely, and I needed a friend, and I found this kitten, and I was like, all right, let's try a kitten. And then a year later, we started finding kittens in our apartment complex parking lot, and their mom dragging bagels out of our trash. And then we're like, wow. Oh, poor things, we should feed them. And of course, you start that, and that's the slippery slope. Then you become president of a cat rescue.
18 years later. And that happened you were able to put that together pretty quickly over the pandemic. So your rescue is called
Moby. Nobody, we were official this January, but the process had been in place since 2020, almost 9 months it took
Yeah.
from the application to finally get the certification from the feds.
Yeah, which is pretty rapid for them.
Oh, yes, yeah,
It's because I've heard horror stories of everything you have to go through to set up a nonprofit. But the nonprofit, let's just get the name out there, Moby
Yeah.
Kit Rescue. That's website is like Moby Dick, mobykitrescue.org. So you can go there and donate. Can they see adoptable kittens and cats there?
Yeah, so yeah, there is a pet finder link at the bottom to see our adoptable animals. You can also follow Moby Kit on Instagram or the Facebooks where you can see many more pictures of kittens. The website, we have a link to Pet Finder, and so whenever an animal goes up for adoption, we put them on Pet Finder, and almost immediately, our adoption coordinator just gets buried under a pile of applications, and so then they take the cat off Pet Finder. So we usually don't have like a big flux of animals listed on the website. Social media is a little bit better if you want to follow a kitten until they're ready for adoption. That's the place to do it.
Plus, you get cute kitten photos, videos. It's a win-win. Even if
Yeah.
you don't want to adopt, you're like, ooh, cute kittens.
Oh yeah.
Who
Yeah.
doesn't love that?
Exactly. Yeah. It's a quality social media follow. If I
Oh
do
yeah,
say so myself.
I will endorse it wholeheartedly.
Yeah.
I'd like to talk about your last solo project, She Makes Waves, because that is a phenomenal record. It's actually a physical record too, a nice slab of vinyl. I just want to start by saying I love the cover. As a
Oh,
beautiful,
yeah.
that's beautiful cover art. Who put together the art?
So Elizabeth Hargraves is the artist's name. She's based out of Chicago, but she and I grew up here in New Bedford. We both went to New Bedford High, and she went on to become a graphic designer. And so she lives with her husband in Chicago now, but she runs under the name Double Bond Studios in Chicago, and they do between her and her husband, they build websites. I mean, she does other graphic design, but that's kind of been she sort of got into graphic design as it was pivoting away from maybe as much printed material and a lot more into digital things. And so, yeah, she has done my website. She's done almost all of the cover art for me, but I kind of gave her a loosey goosey, like, can you make some art that has to do with me? Pictures, make it look like a collage or something like that. And she nailed it. She hit it out of the park.
Absolutely. I'm going to say that you hit it out of the park with that record. Can you give folks the background on the writing and making of She Makes Waves? Because it's a fascinating project.
Yeah, so She Makes Waves was a project that I had brought to the New Bedford Whaling.
New Bedford Whaling National Historical Park. Yeah, I'm always thwarted by the order of those words, but I just usually call it the Whaling Park. It's
The
our
Whaling
national
Park.
park, our national park in downtown New Bedford.
Yeah.
The amazing park rangers who work there.
Totally. Yeah. They have a great program where they give fellowships to artists who apply. And I was very lucky to get a fellowship from them. And my my project that I had come up with was She Makes Waves. And initially it was supposed to be a 3 to 5 song EP that was going to be based around the women of the South Coast area from the 19th century, because I just thought that was a real gritty time to be a woman. I mean, it's always a gritty time to be a woman, but
Yeah. That was a bit grittier.
that was a lot grittier. And I connected with somebody, Kathy Saunders from the Whaling Museum, and she was talking about the website that had been curated called Lighting the Way. And it's just basically a library of all these amazing women who, made a difference in the community. So really that was the fodder for all the songs initially. And I went and picked a few that I thought, I could try and see the world through their eyes a little bit, or ask those questions about what was it like to be a woman around here in, 1900s. And there are a lot of notable women. And I wrote a couple songs, and then I think that was like November 2019 that I got the project started. And then, 5 months later, the world shut down, and it's like, well, I can't record anything. didn't want to do it myself. I really wanted to have a professional pressing the buttons, because I've tried to do everything DIY, and at this point in my life, it's like if you have someone on your team and you have the money to pay someone to do a good job, get somebody else to do a really good job. Like, I don't need to play all the instruments. I don't need to record all the things. So that kind of went on hold for a bit, but I was still writing. And of course, in my own personal life, I was discovering things about myself, in terms of my own identity and sexuality, and just the having to be locked down and shut in with your thoughts for 2 years changed a lot of people. And for me, one of those things was my sexuality and coming out as a queer woman. And it took a long time for me to be able to say that to my folks. And it was not, they did not respond well to that. And so that was the big part of the rest of the album, became writing songs about this struggle between my sexuality and who I always had been. And also a lot had to do with the church that I grew up in, where I experienced religious trauma syndrome, which I also discovered was a thing. And so there was just a lot of pain to work through, and I'm still working through it. But when time came around for the record to be recorded again, I had a lot more songs ready to go. And I asked the national parks, I was like, I know these aren't about women in the 19th century, but how about me? I'm here. And yeah, go on, put their songs on there. So half of the songs are about, specific women and their biography. And then 3 of them are my songs, about my experience here and my changes.
But they fit. I mean, I think that's the thing. I know that you knew that. You wouldn't have put them on the record if they didn't fit. But, there's this quest for being your authentic self that these women had to go through, that you have to go through too, which, as, a straight white dude, it's not really that much of a struggle for me. But for a lot of other people, being your authentic self, finding your authentic self and being able to express it is really a loaded proposition. It's really difficult, and particularly when you have to broach it with, people you're close to who may not really buy into it. It's hard.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean, and one of the songs on there was Maria Key, who was a lesbian, a very out, as out as she could be, I think, during the time. Yeah. But she started her life here in New Bedford, and then went on to champion women's rights and abortion rights, and birth control was a big thing. She did move to Portland. And so that was a project that I gave to my partner, Kim, and I asked Kim to write a song about Maria Key. Initially, I was also going to have other songwriters on writing, but since Kim was in my life at that point, she took that song on. And then, there were so many of the biographies that I read about women in the 19th century were seen through the lens of what their husbands were doing. And around here, many of those husbands were going off to the Civil War, or going to whaling, to the sea, to fish, and many of them did not come back. And these women just keep going.
They had to find a way to keep going and survive. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And I was very curious about like what their story was, if it wasn't seen through, the framework of their husband's work. And so that's.
I think you ended up muted somehow. Oh, no worries.
Sorry about that.
All right. No worries.
There we go. I don't know what you heard last, but.
Seen through the lens of their husbands. That was the last thing. And I think you pretty much had finished it at that point. That record is available on Bandcamp, right? The physical vinyl as well as digital. You still have a few copies of
yes,
that.
I do have a few left of the vinyl copies that I bring with me to shows. Yeah, they paid for a limited run of 50 vinyl records, which was amazing. And so, we've got probably, 15 or so left.
If you go to a Sarah Donner or Kitten Slay Dragons or Middle Spoon show and they have it, grab it. It's it's phenomenal to listen to on vinyl. You knocked Lou Reed off my turntable the week that I got that, which that's not easy to do.
Oh.
But it's a phenomenal piece of work, and definitely check it out on streaming as well. I believe it's on all the usual streaming suspects.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely phenomenal. So I want to ask you about influences. Like, who are the inspirations for you musically or personally? Not just looking back growing up, but I mean, I imagine there are people now that you find inspiring.
Yeah. I think so. I didn't learn how to play the guitar until I was 20, 21, something like that. I grew up learning the violin, and I was in choir and a lot of church music stuff and band and orchestra. And I went to school to Westminster Choir College, which was more of a classically based place. But so my influences up to that point were rather conservative, shall we say, I suppose, like musicals and church music. And I mean, yeah, whatever my dad was listening to, I guess, was kind of I had to be influenced by.
Yeah.
And I've kind of stepped away from that now. But I think at the time it was like probably the Moody Blues and Bread and very dramatic music, I would say. Nothing too chill, like lots of feelings.
70s AM soft rock.
Yeah. And I think the first time I ever heard Ani DeFranco was in college. And I was like, what is this person doing with this guitar? How is she getting this sound? And if you don't know who Ani DeFranco is, she's a singer-songwriter. I think she's probably in her mid-40s, early 50s now.
Yeah.
But she just championed a real DIY movement of get in your car, take your instrument, and just play and go.
Just her and a guitar. I mean, she's phenomenal.
Yeah. I mean, she has a band now and stuff like that, but she was very political, or is, I should say, very political, very outspoken, very feminist. But for me, the first thing I heard was the guitar work, and it was so percussive. I don't know if you've ever heard of cking. She's another really
cking is so good. She's so good.
I love that so much. And I started playing around with different tunings, and then I discovered like all these other palettes of guitars and like a baritone ukulele that just opened up songwriting for me. And again, I think before that I was writing stuff on the piano, but I like that insight that you have that too many keys was not helpful for the ADHD, and so having one instrument that kind of just shifts around 4 to 5 to 6 chords, as you're starting out was plenty for my brain and enough that I could focus on the songs and not get too distracted by the instrument, I guess.
Yeah, and what I love about the guitar too is that you can use the same shapes, same chord shapes around the neck and get different things out of them. So you're not reinventing the wheel. It's like, oh, if I take this C major shape and I slide it up, I've got this really interesting D chord, that kind of thing. So there's that flexibility of like, I can take the same thing that I'm using, go elsewhere with it, and make interesting sounds.
Yeah, you don't have to reinvent the wheel, as it were. And that also then that carries over to a ukulele. Like the same shapes are on those instruments too, even though they're different chords. It is very cross marketed. No, that's not the word.
Cross-functional. It's one of those words.
Intersecting.
Cross-disciplinary.
Yes,
something
sure.
like that. Well, that's either a real term or I just made it up. But
so she definitely influenced my guitar work, and I feel like Regina Spektor was a big influence in terms of my vocals. I loved. She uses her voice as an instrument as much as she uses it as a communication device to sing words, and I think that was the first time where I heard somebody, take a really beautiful ballad song. This is called Some Days. And at the end of it, she does this like, it works. But it gave me this, like a little bit of freedom and permission to be different and to find different sounds to come out of my body to try and incorporate that into my songwriting. So Ani DeFranco, Regina Spektor, those are some of my go-to influences. In terms of like who am I a fan of? Is that something?
I'd love to hear that. Who are you a fan of?
Who am I a fan of? I love the Weebies. The Weebies is one of my favorites. I like a lot of. I don't like to write chill music, but I do need to listen to it probably more than.
That
more
makes
than.
sense though, because if you write more intense music, because I think emotionally your songs are intense, and like what are you going to spend your downtime with? Are you going to spend your downtime with more intense music, or are you going to be like, I need something ambient here?
Yeah, I love some chill music. Imogen Heap is another one that I
Oh,
who I love a lot. And that kind of led into the Kitten Slay Dragons, Beep Boops and stuff. But yeah, those are some big names on my.
yeah, great influences, absolutely. And actually, you mentioned Kitten Slay Dragons again, and that reminds me that my first live show that I got to go to was seeing you guys at the Poor Farm Tavern in downtown New Bedford. My introduction to arts and culture in New Bedford. So,
Hey,
we
we were like, look, it's a friend. We're making a friend because
making
we
friends.
moved to the area too.
Well, it's wild for me too, because there was a point, probably around 40, where like, I guess I'm just done making friends. And now, I'm in my 50s, like, no, you don't have to be done doing that. I think that's a great lesson to just generally to take is like, I'm not done because I'm this age. I can
Right.
make friends. I can do new things. What brought you back to New Bedford? Because you were in New Jersey for many, many years.
hmm What brought me back? The real estate, Scott. The real estate.
I can relate. I can relate.
Uh, yeah, I was just tired of living in a 750 square foot apartment with four cats and a partner, and many of our friends, like we had a really good time and we have really good friends, but there was a point where some of our closest friends, and because we were in Princeton, New Jersey, which if you think of New Jersey, most people are like, New Jersey, the turnpike, what exit, whatever. But Princeton, New Jersey is quite a bubble of wealth and privilege, and it is very clean. There's no crime. Like, it's beautiful, but gosh, it gets boring. And as a creative type that I am, I was like, I don't even think I'm that punk or any, I'm not a rebel, but when you have blue hair and you live in the land of like Talbots and polo shirts, it's like, whoa, did you
You're
come
radical.
yeah, did you come from Portland? You must be from Portland. Um, so it was never home. It was never home, and I never felt that I was ever gonna be able to build a community of people like myself. I always felt that I was a bit of a novelty there. And my family was still here, and I love my family very, very much. And I wanted a chance to spend time being close to them. Michael's family was in New Jersey, and so it's like, let's take a turn up to Massachusetts, and we could afford space up here. And we were at a point in our lives where we did not want to live in a tiny shoebox, and the real estate up here was much more affordable. In New Jersey, the property taxes alone were what we were paying in rent.
Sweet.
So I
Oh
was
my
like, we're never
God.
gonna get
That's
we're not gonna
unbelievable.
grow down here. And it's like, let's head up north where things are a little more affordable.
It's so
Good.
funny because that's basically mine and Margot's story. My wife's Margot's, she's originally from here, living
Mhm.
in Boston in a 950 square foot condo with two school age kids and a dog and a cat. And it's like, that's not sustainable. Like,
No.
it's not going to end well if we don't get some space. And the logical place to go is New Bedford. She was working here for New Bedford Creative part-time, and her family's here. And like, why split the difference between an expensive suburb in New Bedford and Boston, where I was working at the time? It's like, and ended up walking into like a great city, a great creative culture. Like, I
Yeah.
had no idea until I started hanging out here. Like, wait, the local craft beer bar, sponsors outdoor wrestling and has live original music on the weekends. This is crazy. Why
Yeah.
wouldn't I want to live here?
I think there's always I think there's just this legend or of needing to be, in New York City or in LA or Nashville
Or any big
to do
city.
anything worthwhile or have any success. You need to be living in one of those cities. I mean, I've always felt that pressure as a performer, and then it became like, I don't want to audition for other people.
Right.
I don't want other people's permission to make things. And so that was a big impetus to start making my own music, because I did go to school thinking that I was going to go to Broadway. I was accepted to the grad school at NYU, and I was like fully going to go to that. And then I got I got zero funding and no scholarship,
Wow.
and I was still paying off my undergrad. And I was like, well, I guess I'll just go write some songs for myself. And that's how I got started earnestly in writing and recording and trying to make my own stage show.
And now you actually have your own stage at home because you've been hosting the Stoveboat concert series.
Mm-hmm.
How far back does that go? I feel like that's been going on since before I moved here, which was summer 2018.
We had done about a dozen shows before, before the lockdown, and they were about once a month. I've been running shows since I had a younger brother and sister to boss around. So I used to do pageants. We do something called the Christmas Kaleidoscope every year on Christmas Eve when my family would come over. And it was like a little pageant where we had like readings. Anyways, I've always, I don't know, always needed to make a show. Whether I'm the center of the attention or not, I also like the backs. I've been a stage manager, and we had been doing the Stoveboat concerts for about a year and just trying to cultivate a listening space, which at the time I didn't know of any. There aren't a whole lot of places around that you can sit and listen to someone who wants to play music for you, something original. And I get it. I know that's not everyone's jam, but it was my jam and I wanted it. So we started doing it. I was like, why don't you just come to my house and play? And then I don't have to go anywhere, which is fantastic. I love it.
Win-win.
You come to me. Yep.
Stoveboat was a partial inspiration for the Unexpected Music series I put on because I wanted more of those listening spaces. And I think the thing that you're hitting on is, at least in New Bedford, and I think there's some element of this in the South Coast in general, is that we have to create those spaces because they're not fully or even partially in place yet. It would be great. But, that is one of the things I miss from living in Boston, is that, there are those small coffee houses and rock clubs where you could go do stuff. And, maybe people aren't there 100% listening to you, but they are there for the music and the vibe, which is half the battle right there.
Yeah.
So there is that element of, we got to create our own spaces if we want that to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think my joy as a performer comes from a connection and knowing that someone is listening to what I'm saying. And, I'm sure you could talk to my therapist about this going way back of like, why is Sarah singing songs? Why does she need to put on a show? Like it was very hard for me to communicate, in other ways. And that was a great outlet. And so having an audience listening just felt really validating to me. And so, I've always tried to kind of cultivate that. And I don't like to just play music for music's sake, I suppose. It's
communication and connection.
Yeah.
And community.
Yeah. I mean, and some people do like to play music for, like, they just want to play, and that's
it's fine too. There's nothing wrong with it.
Good. Yeah. But not me.
Sarah, before we hit the home stretch, is there anything else you want to talk about that we haven't hit on?
Oh gosh. I don't think so. No.
Okay. Well, we're going to round things out with what I'm going to call the 5 queries of unknown origin, because I love because I love Blue Oyster Cult, because obviously I know where these questions came from. I'm asking them. But what is the first musical memory you can think of?
I think I sang at a wedding when I was 5. I sang a song about Jesus as someone walked down the aisle. That's what I remember.
Was that your first performance too?
I think so. I think it's like my first in front that I remember. I mean, I was always trying to impress people and get to be everyone's center of attention. But I think this was the first an audience. I mean, it wasn't my special day, but
it kind of was too, though.
Yeah, there was a little bit of pressure. I remember also I was supposed to do a musical thing once for an Easter pageant or something, and I got chicken pox, and I was crushed. It was like, I'm not going to be able to go to church and sing the song for everybody. And I remember crying that because I had
Oh,
chicken
wow.
pox. I think I was mad at my sister too because they came from her. So Rachel, you ruined my opportunity. I was going to be a star.
What is one record you would have to take with you to a desert island? Like one you absolutely would have to have there.
Ooh, gosh, so many, right? I mean, there's so many musicals that I would want to take, but I feel like the soundtrack to the Royal Tenenbaums
Oh, that's a great
might be
soundtrack.
might be one of those. Yeah, it's a really, really good mix of songs. And I like the instrumental stuff too. They have some cool string quartets on there.
Nice. We talked about influences earlier, but who's a super sneaky secret influence? Somebody that people listen to your work and wouldn't go, that person's an influence? Well, it doesn't have to be musical. It could be anywhere.
Gosh. I mean, I don't know if it's I don't know if it's a surprise influence, but I was gonna say science.
Science.
Type songs. I mean, I have some very like obviously Schrodinger's cat songs and stuff like that, but I think I gravitate towards a lot of metaphors with biology, like Sick Machine, and you know
Yeah.
what I mean. And
Well, you also have the song Rosalind, which was almost like a proof of concept for She Makes Waves, about historical woman
yeah, I was
scientists.
thinking that too. Yeah.
It's like, wow, it's funny because it's true. Like you do use, like scientific and medical analogies. It's really a funny thing. I hadn't noticed before until
Yeah.
you mentioned it.
Yeah. Yeah. My mom and I come from my sister. She's got her master's in medical technology or something, and my mom was a nurse, and I have a lot of folks that worked in the medical field in my family, and so being subjected to pictures of things that other people would think are gross or medical stuff, oddities, that's always been fascinating to me, and I love sneaking it into my lyrics when I can.
Who is one musician, living or dead, you would just love to have in your band?
Love to have in my band. Elton John. Just gonna go with Elton John.
Right on. That's perfect. Elton John. And
That
then my last,
man is what a life. I don't know. He makes me smile and just seems like a genuinely like great human being and fantastic. I mean, I know he didn't write all the lyrics, but he could play the keys. He can carry the keyboard. How about that? I know he's like 5 years old.
He's in his 70s, but he can carry the keyboard.
Yeah, he can carry the keyboard. He can play it. Elton John. That's my pick.
All right, last question.
Yes.
What is your South Coast happy place? A place that you just love to be at?
I mean, I take a pretty mean 9-mile walk down to Fort Taber and back to my house.
Ooh.
A while. That walk is my happy place. So I know it's not one place, but I'm looking forward to when the South Coast has a bit more walkable coastline, but the peninsula on an 80-degree no wind. I get very cranky about the wind down there. I will check my phone. Windy. I will check my phone before I go for my walk down by the water, because if it's too windy, I get real cranky real fast. But that's my happy place, and on my ideal weather days would be, down to Fort Taber and around the other side.
Beautiful. Sarah Donner, thank you so much for joining me for this conversation. It's really been a pleasure.
Thank you, Scott, for having me. It's been fun.
And thanks for joining us for another In Focus podcast, which is generously sponsored in part by Heavenly Spirits Importers and funded in part with grants from the New Bedford Cultural Council and the Fairhaven Cultural Council, local agency supported by the Mass Cultural Council, a state agency. I'm Scott Bishop, and thanks for listening to the Artists Index.
We'll see you next week for another episode of the South Coast Artist Index podcast. To learn more about the South Coast Artist Index, visit theartistindex.com. Find us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Be the artist you believe you are, and let's take care of each other out there.